I've been seeing this sentiment lately that what's looking like the first year for the Switch 2 is not gonna be one of Nintendo's best releases, and I don't think that's true, like at all. I've touched on this a little bit. I talked about it when taking a look at what games were coming up after Donkey Kong, and since then, we've actually had a Direct, and even after that Direct, I saw a lot of people harping a bit on what Nintendo's current plans are for the Switch 2, and it's something I just don't fully get. I understand some of the comparisons to how strong the first year of the original Switch was, but even that is kind of overblown. I wanted to take a moment to look at, all the major first-party things that released for the original Switch during its first year, take a look at what we have so far for the Switch 2, and what we should have by the end of it. A lot of this is obviously still in progress. We're only basically 4 months in to the Switch 2's release, and there is a whole lot of time left before we finish up that first year. But even just going off of the stuff that is slated and stuff that is likely to release before that year is up, it is very close to the original Switch. So to begin with, real quick, let's just list off all the major games that released on the original Switch during its first year, and then we'll go over what's released so far for the Switch 2 and what's coming up after that. For the original Switch, I think some of the biggest names worth getting out of the way right away are Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and Splatoon 2. And then topping this off, there are a number of smaller scale games, or maybe games that just weren't quite as big of a hit, with things like 1-2-Switch, ARMS, Pokken Tournament DX, Snipper Clips, Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which is technically a Ubisoft game, but it's a Mario game, we're counting it. And then one that I am just gonna let sneak in real quick because it did come out after the 1 year mark, but only by a couple weeks, we did also get Kirby Star Allies. Now on that list, the really big kind of high profile ones were of course those first 5 I mentioned, one of which was a re-release of a game that already came out back on the Wii U. It's just that no one really bought a Wii U, at least relatively to how many people bought a Switch. And of course, as we know, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe did go on to become the most successful game on the platform because Mario Kart's just one of those titles where people are gonna get it. And even with that in mind, it is a very strong lineup when you're looking at having a new 3D Mario, a 3D Zelda game that arguably had a massive impact on just a lot of games coming out after it, inspiring a whole kind of different approach to open world game design. And then Splatoon 2 and Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which have slightly more focused to dedicated audiences, but are very beloved by the people that are into those. Now, as for the Switch 2 list, of course, again, we're only 4 months in, so I can really only talk about the games that have released for sure, or the ones that have launch dates before June of next year, so this is probably going to fill out even more, but the picture that we have so far, as far as games releasing for the Switch 2 that are exclusive to the Switch 2, include, of course, Mario Kart World, which was the big release title, Donkey Kong Bonanza, which came out a couple months later, and then we've had a couple other releases already, like Welcome Tour and Drag X Drive, which aren't exactly the biggest appeals for the platform. And then looking ahead, of course, we have stuff like Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, Mario Tennis Fever, which just got announced, and Kirby Air Riders. And that's not including a bunch of games that don't currently have confirmed hard release dates, but I think have a very good chance of releasing within the first year, a couple of which just recently got announced. There is that upcoming Splatoon spin-off, Splatoon Raiders, that is a single-player focused game, and based on how early that one was revealed, I think a first half of the year next year would make a lot of sense. Pokemon Pokopia just recently got revealed. That doesn't have a release date yet. That could also be first half of year. Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, that's spring 2026, so that should be before that June cutoff point of when it's going to be the first year the Switch 2 is finished. And then a really big one that could end up being after the first year mark, but I do think is worth considering, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. That was the big closing reveal of the latest Nintendo Direct, and traditionally Fire Emblem games do tend to come out either spring or early summer. Sometimes they come out super early. Engage, for instance, was a January release. I don't think that's what's going to be happening here, but I would not be surprised at all if that game ended up fully releasing in, say, April, May, maybe just in time for the 1 year mark at the start of June. Now, when you look at these two lists, I think there are a number of games that you can draw pretty one-to-one ratios to as far as what Nintendo was going for with this release and the fact that it happened within the first year. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Mario Kart World having a Mario Kart title right away. Welcome Tour and 1-2-Switch having a glorified tutorial game that you have to spend money on. ARMS and Drag X Drive, not exactly tutorial games, but games that are built to highlight some kind of unique functionality of the system, like with the Joy-Cons on the original Switch with ARMS, and the mouse-style controls for Drag X Drive, which I will say, as far as a one-to-one comparison on that one goes, ARMS was definitely the better release as far as a game I enjoyed. Drag X Drive, not quite as much my speed, but it is the release they were trying to aim for that same kind of window. And then even looking at the higher profile titles though, right? Mario Odyssey, Donkey Kong Bonanza. Same team, 3D platformer using a major Nintendo IP. It's not a 3D Mario, and there are some differences that come with that, but it is absolutely occupying a similar territory. Splatoon 2, we don't have a true actual Splatoon sequel confirmed for the near future just yet, but we are getting that spin-off game that is single player focused. So that is not scratching the exact same itch, but it is still Nintendo leveraging that IP, and I think it's something that fans of it are still going to be looking forward to. And then while they are actually very different games, I do think there is at least a general category you could kind of put Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Fire Emblem in as far as being first-party Nintendo JRPGs, just on very different ends of the spectrum, with something that's a bit more of a real-time party-based one and a strategy RPG. Aside from all these, a couple of the games I want to mention real quick, just because I think it does highlight, I think, a little bit of, more library being added to the system. There have been some third-party exclusives for the Switch 2 as well, Bravely Default HD Remaster being the real big one. And we are getting some major releases that are cross-generation. So for instance, Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon Legends EA, those are coming out for Switch 2 within its first year. They just happen to be games that are also coming out for the original Switch as well. So I understand not weighing those the same as a lot of the other ones, because you can just play those with a regular Switch. You don't necessarily have to upgrade for them, though certainly those are going to be the prettier looking versions of the games if you're able to play them that way. And so that brings us back to, again, what I think is the real big problem when people look back at the Switch 1 and so fondly remember that first year, and then look at Switch 2 and are disappointed for some reason. It's the fact that Breath of the Wild happened and was the massive success that it was, and we don't really have a true equivalent for that on the Switch 2. Donkey Kong Bonanza is amazing. It's a wonderful game. I think it's going to be a Game of the Year contender for a lot of people, but I don't think it's really making nearly the same kind of waves that Zelda did back at its release, because that was something that wasn't just simply a game that people really enjoyed and got into. That was absolutely a generation-defining release that, again, influenced a whole lot of stuff that came out after it. I mean, it did not take long for us to immediately start seeing a lot of open-world games change their design approach into something that reflected more what Breath of the Wild did, as opposed to what was much more the standard formula back at the time. Putting aside that hype for Breath of the Wild though, and again, understanding the fact that we still don't know what the full picture of the Switch 2's first year is just yet, I really do think some of the doom and gloom about what's been going on for the system is extremely overrated. I can understand being angry at some things like the general pricing, how expensive the system has gotten, games getting more expensive, Amiibo costing up to $40 depending on what design you want. All that I understand, and that's also a symptom of just a much greater problem going on right now. But if we're just talking about actual releases for the system and the kind of games that are being added to the library, the Switch 2 has a very strong release cadence already set, and we're still actively learning about more and more games coming out very soon. And I didn't even talk about some of the major ports and re-releases happening, like how we're getting Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 on the Switch 2 very soon. I think this is also especially important to highlight because when it comes to the concept of first-party exclusives, Nintendo is basically the one major holdout still. Xbox, as we all know, have been releasing a lot of their first-party stuff on PlayStation platforms. PlayStation, while they haven't really gone to Xbox fully just yet, have been releasing a ton of their stuff on PC, which for a while was a console exclusive deal, and we're already beginning to see some rumors that some might make their way to Xbox, like with Horizon Zero Dawn. That's a whole other thing to dive into. And numerous third parties are focusing less and less on having games that are dedicated to one singular platform. Square Enix, Sega, Capcom, Bandai Namco, all of these companies are looking to release their games on as many platforms as possible. And look, at the end of the day, I don't really care about console war type stuff. You play games you want to play where you want to play them, it's not a big deal. But if we're talking about, a system maintaining its exclusives and having new releases coming that give you a reason to play on that platform, the Switch 2 is kind of the one big one doing that right now. We're getting big releases that are going to be timed exclusive for other platforms still, but even then, you look at PlayStation, Ghost of Yotei is like the one huge release coming up very soon, and their overall 2025 calendar is kind of slow. I'm excited for Ghost of Yotei, I'm looking forward to that, but then I look at the Nintendo lineup and how many titles coming out as often as they are, and yeah, big shiny AAA games are great, but I kind of prefer having a lot of other just lower scope, really fun ones that come out more regularly. The main thing is, I think the idea of Switch 2 not having games or there not being like a regular release cadence set up for the system is just kind of dumb. There is so much happening for it. I understand if not every single game coming out is your cup of tea, and if there's some specific franchise or type of game that you're looking for them to add, you're waiting on the next multiplayer Splatoon, you're waiting on the next 3D Mario, you want the next Xenoblade title, I get that. But if we're just looking at the overall platform health and having games coming out that there are going to be audiences for, yeah, there's a lot on the way. So those are just my thoughts at least. Let me know what y'all think down below in the comments. What games are you looking forward to on the Switch 2? Are you waiting on certain games to be announced or revealed in order to justify picking one up? Do you feel like there's just not a lot of stuff coming out for it? And if so, why that is feeling that way to you? Let me know down below in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you all later.